Herring, better known as Ted. Okay, recording in progress. A little background before we start. I made my home in Western Oregon in the 1970s when Oregon was ecotopia and hordes of newly minted college graduates were flocking to the Pacific Northwest. And this is when the state had posted signs along Interstate 5 welcoming us to Oregon and asking that we please don't stay. Well, we all came and we all stayed. So here I am. I stumbled into Newport, Oregon with a bachelor's degree from the University of Virginia in ecology. So you can imagine my thrill to find myself working as a salmon biologist with Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, chasing wild salmon up and down mountain streams through ancient forests. I had a boat. My husband and I built a little house in the Oregon Coast Range, and we had a couple of kids, and eventually migrated to Corvallis, where I became a professor of science communication at Oregon State University. But let's see, I've got a video I can share. So let's do that. It's not a video, it's just a PowerPoint, but it has some pictures that might be of some interest. Okay, so I'm sharing this now, right? That's me, that's the book, and those are my sketchbooks. You can hear everything, see everything? Good. All throughout the years, decades, I have just filled sketchbooks with the things that I have seen along the way. And you'll see some of these pictures. Some of them are in the book, and some others are showing up here. And actually, I have piles of them. But even though I've been illustrating this story for decades, um, this is not the world I thought I would be bringing this book into. Um, when I first started writing it, this is my seventh book, and I just wanted to share the wonders of the Pacific Northwest with people who didn't know very much about this place. Besides, we have beautiful scenery and we have a problem with owls. But besides that, nobody knew really much. And so even when I was writing, I could see that there was growing threat to our forests. And this book became an invitation to explore what it means to be a forest in a rapidly changing planet. Uh, this is the Pacific Temperate Rainforest, and this book is about a rainforest. So immediately people think, oh, the Amazon, right? Well, no, the Amazon's a tropical rainforest. This is a temperate up there, that skinny little stretch of land between Southeast Alaska and Northern California. Um, but it's the really special part is that measured as the forest of fire and rain, right there in Western Oregon and Western Washington. This is not more than just the middle of the temperate rainforest. It is distinctive in many ways. It's called the seasonal zone. It's also called the range of the northern spotted owl. And it's also called the coastal Douglas fir region. But most of us here, we just call it the west side. But it's far more than just a flyover landscape between uh, San Francisco and British Columbia. Here we have, um, well, I'll go back. This is one of the most productive tree growing areas in the world. And it is distinctive because of its productivity, but also because of its location. We are halfway between the North Pole and the equator, and we are squeezed between a chain of Cascadia volcanoes on one side and a increasingly petulant Cascadia subduction zone on the other. These geologic features don't go north and south. They are just squeezed here. We have more rain than the fog zone down in the redwoods, and we have more fire than the perpetually soggy cedars up north. And there are 10 million people who make their home here, and very few of them realize they live within spitting distance of the largest temperate rainforest in the world. So, I needed to get people's attention. And so that's not what I did. I wrote a book. And I have an East Coast publisher who kept saying, "But where is this place? I don't understand." She could not get her head out of the redwoods. So I told her, this is a magical land at the tumultuous edge of a shifting continent at a precarious moment in history. It's a place giant trees, explode mountains, disappearing owls, biblical floods, hellish conflagrations, sky-loving creatures that eat light, and an invisible kingdom of life and death buried underground. It's all born of fire, drenched in rain, and it constantly changing. And this is where we live. Well, that got their attention for a while. But the real thing that distinguishes our part of the rainforest than any other is the level of disturbance. We have fire, we have volcanic eruptions, we have massive floods, and we have pestilence. Not as much as some places on the east side, but we've got our own bugs and our own problems. There are few places on Earth that face such titanic disturbances as those that have shaped this forest of fire and rain. And there are fewer still that manage that disturbance with such beautiful grace. And because, or despite all of that turmoil, um, from thousands of years, this forest enjoys a distinctively benign climate for trees to grow very big and very old. Uh, Unlike other rainforests around the world, the giant conifers dominate this landscape. Most rainforests have deciduous trees. But we are much more like the time of the dinosaurs, before the rise of flowering plants, before the rise of mammals, before the continents drifted into their current location, there were conifers. And the conifers that we have now here, the Sitka spruces, like this picture, but also the Western red cedars, Western hemlock, they are the tallest of their kind in the world. And even our deciduous trees, the the uh, the red alders here, the black cottonwoods, and certainly the big leaf maples are the tallest of their kind in all of North and South America. So uh, the one tree that rules them all in the Douglas fir region is the coastal Douglas fir. And that's the second tallest of any tree species anywhere in the world. It's second only to the coast redwoods, or or at least it used to be. Um, in 1918, the good people of San Francisco initiated the Save the Redwoods League, and they have managed to protect more than 200,000 acres of old growth redwoods. But there's never been a Save the Douglas Fir League. Um, the largest Douglas firs were cut early in the 20th century, while the largest of the redwoods were being saved. There they are. So at this point, a lot of people ask, well, how big were the Douglas firs? Um, by 1930, most of the largest Douglas firs along the coast and into the Coast Range had been cut down. But in 1930, a big one fell over, and it fell near Skamania, Washington, close enough where it could be reliably measured by scientists at the Wind River Experiment Station and remeasured by by forestry students from University of Washington. And they found that it was 1,020 years old and 393 feet tall. Well, the current tallest tree is the much celebrated Hyperion redwood in Northern California. That's 380 feet tall. That's 13 feet less than this Washington Douglas fir. But a quick aside, I don't know if you all know Steve Sellett. He was the protagonist of Richard Preston's book a few years ago, The Wild Trees. He was a canopy explorer, and he's now a scientist at Humboldt University. Steve believes that Douglas fir was probably the tallest tree species on the planet before it became Weyerhaeuser's money tree. And yet, despite all of this rampant harvesting in the 20th century, our temperate rainforest still holds some huge trees, enormous volumes of biomass, and an underground life that's just teeming with complexity and storing massive amounts of carbon. In addition, these forests hold a lot of water. It is a rainforest after all, and more than 40% of all the region's water supply comes from uh, this temperate rainforest, with among the highest quality of water in the nation. Hydrologists that I talked to predicted that soon the most valuable product coming out of our West Side National Forest, it's not going to be timber, it's going to be water, abundant, clean water. And almost all of this rainforest is on public land. So it truly is a public treasure. This, you might recognize it, is the Lewis River Trail on the Gifford-Pinchot National Forest. And you can find beautiful stands like this, wild, uncut rainforest throughout the region. These are remnants of one of the most magnificent forests on Earth, a forest that rivaled the redwoods with giant trees and prodigious growth. And these remnants are found almost entirely on the national forests of Oregon and Washington. This is the big, old, wild forest that dominated our region until about the mid 20th century. It was not that long ago, actually within my lifetime. So hold that thought for a minute because it's an important point to remember. Right now, we're going to go back to the very beginning. This is Waldo Lake in the Oregon Cascades, 3 or 4 years after the Carlton fire, 1996, killed about 95% of the trees. And this is what all of our old growth forests looked like at the beginning of their lives. This is how it starts. It starts from disturbance. But within a few years, stand replacing fire becomes a sunny, shrubby, nitrogen fixing landscape. And from this point of view, this is the forest's childhood. And like any childhood, this stage is brief and should not be rushed, should not be logged and replanted. So allow those trees to come up. And within a few decades, those young trees begin to form a canopy. And trees in a young forest are like they're like any other adolescent. They're growing fast and they're packing on biomass and they're reaching for the sky. Their bark is kind of pimply and they compete for dominance. They elbow out the smaller trees and the shrubs. And in their race to the top, the smaller trees fall over and feed the others that survive. Their thin bodies decay pretty quickly. And well, it's kind of brutal. It's like middle school, I guess. But these young trees are also vulnerable. They haven't yet developed uh, fireproof bark. That's not it. Yeah, I guess it is. Um, and they don't have very strong root systems. So they're not wind protected, they're not fire protected. They're not really protected at all. Um, but in the rainforest, let's see. Um, now this is it. In a naturally reestablishing forest after disturbance, when there's a lot of wood on the ground, there's a lot of structure to hold up the young forest. So this is where the grandfather logs, those nurse logs, are giving the inheritance to the next forest. You don't see this in a clear cut. There's not a lot of saving of big old logs on the ground that they're valuable. The ground is scraped clean. But this is how a natural wild forest rebuilds itself. So eventually we have a towering columns of big old trees and layered canopies and this wild looking forest that has been allowed to grow at its own rate and its own way without being planted. And recovering from the disturbance that is just part of its life. Um, so we can't really improve on this wild forest, and particularly, uh, well, taking fire, for example, which is a place where our government thinks they really can improve. But we know that a wild, wet rainforest just doesn't burn that easily. And that's because it's got these deep, damp layers of living soil, the vast, wet blankets of moss and ferns and heavy down logs and big standing trees armored with fire-resistant bark. But when the forest does burn, you know, it can be fierce. This was the Twin Firs fire in Rainier National Forest. We happened to be there kind of trying to get out of the way. And I made a real quick sketch because it was just so beautiful the way the smoke was coming through. And it's horrific, but it's beautiful in a way. And, when our rainforest catches fire, it's not because there's too many trees. It's because there's too much wind. And we all know the formula for fire weather. It's a long-term drought with high air temperatures and low air humidity and a spark, say a lightning strike or a firecracker thrown into a canyon. Um, but it's hot, dry, hurricane force east wind that will ignite that spark into an inferno. And you can't stop a wind-blown firestorm. This is what we saw in 2020 in Oregon and Washington and British Columbia and many times before and since. And many people, including possibly some of your colleagues in the Department of Natural Resources, I don't know if you know these folks, Josh Holofsky, Dan Donato, and many others are saying that we should treat these wind-blown wildfires the same way we would treat a tornado or a hurricane or earthquake. We know it's going to happen. And we know it's going to be destructive, but we can't control it. So they say we can prepare for it. There's lots of information on how to prepare for it, and it's all good. But preparing doesn't mean thinning the rainforest. Thinning is an idea that we've imported from wildfire management on the east side. In the dry pine forests of eastern Oregon, eastern Washington, Idaho, Colorado, Nevada, thinning works in fire nurtured ecosystems, but not in a rainforest. Thinning a mature rainforest will make that forest more susceptible to fire, not less, because thinning opens the rainforest to more sun, more wind, more unnaturally high rates of drying. It compacts that soil and damages that spongy underground life, roots and fungal networks. And it removes the squishy, moisture-holding logs on the forest floor. And the sad fact is that thinning the forest often removes some of the big trees too, because big, armored, fire-resistant trees are cut to pay for the logging of the littler trees. And that's logging that didn't need to happen in the first place. So, as you know, uh, during the last couple of years, the new federal forest policies have proposed to open millions of acres of federal forests to increase logging without consideration of environmental impacts or public comment because of the implied threat of catastrophic fire. And this image is um, the Northwest Forest Plan on fire. Deeply troubling. Fire is a deadly serious issue and should not be used as a political scare tactic um, to allow logging companies to cut down the last remaining wild forests on public land. Um, the federal government is planning to open 45 million acres of federal forest, supposedly for fire safety. Their plan will be published tomorrow. But when you consider that more than 80% of the wildfires in Western Oregon and Washington are human caused, and those human caused fires are 4 times likely to be within 50 meters of a road, then road building into roadless areas and logging into uncut forests makes no sense. But maybe more important is we don't have enough mature federal forests to survive another round of industrial logging. The trees just aren't there anymore. You got to consider how fast we lost the rainforest in the range of the northern spotted owl. Our forests in Western Washington and Oregon used to be the most productive in the world. But within my lifetime, the giant trees and the tangled rainforest, at least in the Oregon Coast Range, have been replaced by tree farms of spindly telephone poles. Today, less than 10% of Oregon's old forest still stands, almost all of it on federal land. And yet, a return to the 1980s level of logging is being pushed by the current administration. Well, the current technology, the feller bunchers and the deburrs and the cut to length harvesters, you can cut down a 300-year-old forest in 3 days. And it'll take 300 years to grow back, if it grows back at all. One operator with one joystick can cut and drop 1,000 trees in a day. Logging jobs from the 1980s have completely disappeared. So you think wood might be a renewable resource, but a forest is not renewable at any human scale. Our temperate rainforest has survived thousands of years of fire, volcanic eruptions, changing climates. It knows how to survive all sorts of disturbances. But this rainforest cannot survive industrial logging. A forest is not a tree farm. So this goes back to the healthy forest. This is an illustration from the book. It's much nicer in color because you can see
Well, could
the
you
net.
turn that down?
I'm sorry. Oh, that wasn't addressed to me, huh?
Sorry, yeah.
Um, this is the underground network illustrated by the subway system of Washington, D.C. It didn't show up in the book because it was black and white, but I put that illustration in purposely and made a card of this image and sent it to some of our um, Senate and congressional representatives in Washington, D.C., so they would have something that they recognized in this forest being their network as the metaphor. But the point is that our federal forest may be the last best chance we have to restore a whole functional forest ecosystem across the Pacific Northwest. There's enough biological memory in the soil, in the remnants of old and in the genetic diversity to rebuild a magnificent forest like the one that stood here just one human lifetime ago. Our forest's wounds are relatively fresh. We still have a chance to recover what we lost in the 20th century if we can simply stop cutting down our forests. We have plenty of private woodlots, tree farms, plantations to provide the wood we want for homes and furniture. The national forests contribute only 8% of the nation's timber supply. We would hardly notice it if we stopped commercial harvest on public lands tomorrow. If we simply stop cutting down our rainforest, we will do much to uh, address our multiple crises of diminished water supply, extinction of species, and accelerating changes in climate. Hmm. I don't know why this is. That's the one I wanted to look at because I wanted to go back to remember that I was a salmon biologist when I first came to Oregon. And I have uh, come to feel like we all are salmon people. And I remind people all the time that salmon need rivers and rivers need forests. This rainforest is worth more standing than cut down. It matters what we leave behind. For my grandson and for your future grandchildren, we must say no. So thank you for your time, and this is a good time for your thoughts and any questions you might have.
Wow, thank you so much for that. That was so beautiful, and your illustrations are just so lovely. I really appreciated that. Yeah, so for questions, just do like Judith and Tina have, just raise your hand, and we'll just go around and ask questions. So Judith, if you want to go first.
Yes, that was beautiful. Thank you very much. I just wanted to say with your drawings, etc., I don't know what inspired me. 70 years old, but this is I can not remember another book that I have read that I've sat down instead of taking notes, I started drawing everything you were talking about. Your descriptions and the way you describe things is I have many illustrations in my notebook, to remind me what things are instead of just writing notes. Um, your prose is just phenomenal, and your detail of describing what's beneath the soil and what's in the trees and all the scientific terms it's just marvelous. I've never read another book with such detail to every minute. I have a picture of the tardigrades, the little bears drawn
Yeah,
in.
the water
Um,
bears. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just
Well,
wonderful,
thank
and I'll
you,
let
Judith.
other people speak, but it's
Just
just
real
wonderful.
quick,
I
I will.
really love it.
Thank you. I'm, I will be teaching an honors college class at Oregon State University in about a month. I get a whole week of students before classes start to take them out in the forest and do just the one rule. It's all analog, no cell phones. And they will be sitting in the forest and observing. We will have scientists come in and help us see what's there. But what I want from these students is the ability to trust their own observations as a record of having had this experience. So that experience is not just a snapshot, but it is an immersion into a place. Will be the place for us will be the forest, but that same sense of observation and assimilation and reflection is a skill that we need to nurture in our future scientists. And so you're talking about sketching your notes. That's a wonderful way to start. So thank you. Um,
Thank you.
I, somebody else will need to call on hands because I can't see everybody.
Yeah, no worries. I can help you out with that. Judith, did you have more to add or were you good there?
Well, I just, at some point, I'd like to know what you feel about how we can get change made and get the word out, not to cut these forests.
Yeah.
So maybe that could be at the end, but
Well, it's
it's
the hundred
just,
dollar
it's
question right
very,
now is how to stop this machinery that is just spitballing, just scattershot terror into our hearts. And I think we cannot be complacent. We have to push back. We have to show some resistance. How? I don't know. Well, for a long time, when people say, "What can I do?" I'd say, if you have any money, send it to the organizations with lawyers, because it's the lawyers who are holding the last line against the logging. But they're not holding the line anymore. I remember when I was very young, and it was the timber wars here in Oregon and Washington, that there was a woman who was about my age now, back then, with a chain around her neck tied to a logging truck. And I'm hoping that I don't end up there. But I think that resistance and vocal complaint. Some people say it's pointless to write to my congressman because he already agrees. No, he needs to know that you care and that this is a fight that you want him to fight for you. So I think we do need to have our voices heard as comments during the comment period, as letters to the editor, wherever you can speak up, be loud. Anybody else?
Tina, go ahead.
Well, thank you for coming. And our book club sends us links to do that very thing to for advocacy and to speak up, which is great. We can plant forests. I'm part of Whatcom Million Trees projects, which is what we do. The question I have for Peg is that on your website, you have the exploration for art and journal adventures. And my question is, I see that you just mentioned you're having one at the university. Um, do you have sort of boot camps or other like local things that you do outside of Oregon along this nature journaling for the
Um,
exploration?
I do a lot of workshops, and they are almost always organized by somebody else, and I am invited in, which is very easy on my part, that I don't have to keep track of participants or food and drink and bathrooms. Somebody else is doing that, and I just come in for the easy part, which is to do workshops in forest ecology and journaling. I've done it with college students. I've done it with teachers. I've done it with families. And I mentioned 4 previous books that I wrote was middle readers, middle 4th through 7th grade kids. And so I did a lot of classroom work during that time. So
Nice.
that's the kind of expeditions that I do anymore is tag along with other people who are already planning an outing or have an organization that provides space or an interested audience. And then, hey, I'm your gal.
Sounds good. Well, thank you. Also, I love the book, but I really wanted you to know our library carried the Audible version through
Uh-huh.
our library app, and I can't tell you how many times I listened to it. It's just done so well. The narrator does a great job, but I just wanted you to know that it's particularly just the book is beautiful. We love it. Thank you for coming again.
Oh, good. Thank you. I like audiobooks too, but they do miss the illustration. So I hope that you have a chance to thumb through the picture version.
Definitely. I'm a nature journaler, so I love what you've done. Thank you.
Oh, good. Good.
Awesome. Thanks, Tina. Amy, you have a question.
Yeah, like many, I have a couple of them. The first one I had is like, what was your inspiration when you were a young girl? And that said, this is something, this is what I want to dedicate my life to. Was there a pivotal moment, or, what is it that inspired you?
Yeah, that's an easy one. I grew up in the military. My dad was a Marine. We moved around. Well, we moved from coast to coast about every year or two. So my mom always planned a wonderful camping trip so that we would take 2 weeks in a little camper with, 3 kids and 2 parents, hitting all the national parks across the country. And then we'd come back and hit, along, this interstate and then that interstate and then Route 66. But that introduction was my mother's way of softening the supposed hardship of moving around all the time. I think it was hard on her. It wasn't hard on me because it was fun. We got to go camping every summer and then it was, a new room that I got to rearrange my horses. I was also the youngest of 3 kids. So, I was given the coloring books and paper and pencils and, just go ahead, go outside. So it was something that I did from the very earliest stage was just poke around the forests or poke around the campgrounds and collect things and draw them. And that became something that I really nurtured in high school and in college. I decided that I needed to major in 2 different things. That I wanted to be an ecologist, which was at that time an emerging science, and I wanted to continue doing my art. So I always thought it would be better to be a scientist who could draw or an artist who knew science, because I'm not sure that I could have been the very best ecologist nor the very best artist. But if I had 2 things, maybe that would win me a seat in some of these expeditions. In fact, it did. So I was able to go on a lot of really interesting biological expeditions uh, to various places because I knew the science and I could draw.
Nice. Excellent. Thank you for that. I'm also a military brat and the youngest of my siblings as well. And I love to go out camping. My
That sounds familiar.
Yes, yes, sounds very familiar. Also a science teacher, but for high school level. But I see you have your bookshelf behind you. Love, love, love to see all the books. And do you have a book that you would recommend that we read, or a book that you would recommend for someone to read?
Um, yeah. Let me go to my bookshelf. I'll get a couple.
It sounds like an Ezra Klein thing, right? At the very end, the last question he asks all his guests is, and finally, what are 3 books that you would recommend? If we could just get one more.
Um, so here's 3 that are interesting to me. This one is wonderful. However, it is Oregon focused, but Chandra Legui wrote this. She's part of Oregon Wild. I work very closely with her, and it's a great hiking guide. This is the book I pull out when people say, "Well, where can we see these forests?" Well, this is a good place, but it's Oregon based. I don't know of a corollary in Washington, but my guess is that there is one. This is another good book. This is Cascadia Field Guide, and it's a series of essays, um, rather strictly organized by art, ecology, and poetry, but it's a great read. And it breaks up the larger landscape of Cascadia into regions and then focuses on the organisms that are there and essays and artwork that go along with that. The last one I love to recommend is Robin Wall Kimmerer's first book. Now, she's famously, deservedly famous for her braiding sweetgrass, but in my estimation, this is a better book. This is called Gathering Moss, and she talks a lot about the biology of mosses and such delicate unassuming, undemanding plants. And she makes this very sweet metaphor on that these plants have endured for a gazillion years because they haven't asked much and they give a lot. And it's such a humbling message for humans who are not going to last that long that maybe there is another way to live. It's not
Wow.
quite as spiritual as braiding sweetgrass. It has, quite a bit of biology in it, but I think it's a lovely book.
Thank you so
So
much for
there's
that. It took me time to get all those in there, but I've got all those in my books to read list. So thank you so much. And
okay,
again,
good.
your prose, it's just been so delightful to read this book. And we were talking at the last book club meeting, and I was just admiring the breadth, that it's not just about the trees or the activism, it's about the mosses and the roots and the fungi and the geology. And it's just so all encompassing, and it's just lovely, and your pictures just really add to it. So thank you so much for writing such a wonderful book. I'm glad that we chose this one for our book club.
Oh, thank you. You guys are like the perfect audience for this book. It does include a lot of stuff in there because the forest is a very diverse place. It's a complicated, complex ecosystem, uh, and to honor all of it in that fullness is part of enjoying it. And all I wanted from this book, all I wanted was that people would stop to appreciate the forest that frankly is no longer there. You don't need a map to explore the old forests of Western Oregon and Western Washington. You need your imagination because mostly that forest is just exists in fragments. But those fragments could regrow a magnificent forest if we would just step back.
Wow,
Are
so
there more
beautiful.
questions?
Yes, we have one from Sally. Next.
Hi, Peg. Yes, thank you for writing this. I first read it when it came out in 2024, and now am reading it again, and finding so much more to delight me and inspire me. I love the way that you've interwoven personal stories with such detailed research and science. It's really a perfect read for me, so thank you. Um, you mentioned earlier, in response to a question about uh, what can we do to make the powers that be recognize how invaluable the forests are, and that they need to save them right now. And that's one of the things many of us do, is to try to work with the Department of Natural Resources in Washington. And it's quite the uphill climb. Uh, I've been an educator in the STEM field, so a mathematician for 45 years. And in that time, I've noticed a declining amount of student activism and protest. Um, and I don't know particularly the reason for that. They might be really busy, more so than when we had time to be kind of dedicated students.
Mhm.
But do you have any sense of how I could encourage my students to write LTEs and things like that? Because I know they feel the same way I do, but they just don't think it's going to make any difference, or they just can't find the time to do it.
Mhm.
And I don't know what to say to them to really encourage it. And I'm running out of years, so they have to step up. Thank you
Mhm.
for taking my question.
Well, that's a question that I ask myself too. And one of the groups that I will be working with for the balance of the summer are high school teachers who have the same question as you do. Frankly, it's kind of easy to inspire uh, a fifth grader. No, they're smart enough to get it, but they're not so old that they're snarky. But I'm not telling you anything you don't already know, but it's a lot harder to convince, an eighth grader or ninth grader that this is something to care about. What I found is that by the time they hit 10th grade, though, they sort of are ready. But again, you know more about these kids than I do. Taking them out in the forest as much as you can would be one way. And I know teachers who have really arm wrestled with their um, administrations to allow them to take their students out once a week for a hike. Just hike in the woods, take a journal, note what you notice. And then over the year, you will have a record. Those students will have a record of the things that they observed in that place over time. And maybe that record will mean something to them. It's not a record that they would keep on their own at all. They need the structure of school to do that. But I I wonder if having the luxury of time in the forest for observation and reflection and recording would build something inside them that would be recorded in paper, would be recorded in those journals, as well as somewhere deeper inside. So that would be one thing that I would think about. And I know that it's much easier to say that than do it. Administrators can just think ability, they can just think of testing, there's so many reasons to do it, but there's a couple of really good reasons why you really must do it. Okay.
Thanks, Peg. Next question is from Susan.
Hey there. Hello, Peg. Thanks again for making the time to be here. I appreciate it. Extraordinary book. I have a ton of dog-eared pages and a ton of notes. And there was a quote from Jim Furnish in, I think, chapter 10 from October 2023. And I don't know if you have, like, is there a transcript or a copy of that interview available to just do a little deeper investigation on what the exchange entailed? Because I'd be curious.
Not my notes from talking with him, but
Okay.
Jim wrote a book
Oh,
called
okay.
Onto the Natural Forest. It's
All right.
published by Oregon State University, and that's another good one.
Oh,
He
great.
was the superintendent. No, what are they called when they're the head of a national forest? Is that called a superintendent? I think so.
Sure.
He was the head of the Siuslaw National Forest on the Oregon coast. And his story is really compelling. He came into that job in 1994, which is the year that the Northwest Forest Plan was first implemented.
Yeah.
The Siuslaw was on the coast and had big giant trees. If you want to grow big trees, you go to the coast of Oregon, coast of Washington, and you're golden. And that's where Weyerhaeuser's money tree was. And that national forest was just famous for its productivity, cutting down those trees. And it was also famous for its salmon runs that were diminishing rapidly with all of the sedimentation and from the logging and the road building. That's where Jim came into this job. When the Northwest Forest Plan shut down 90% of the logging in the old growth forest, Jim's forest was out of business. And he had to think of some other reason to have a national forest there. So very quickly, he retooled the whole mission of the Siuslaw National Forest to be restoration,
Oh,
not logging. not timber production, but restoring the salmon runs and restoring the old wild forest. And that his book is about that. And there's a lot of bits about how horrible Washington, D.C. is and the bureaucracy, and you can skip that part. But there are really heartwarming stories about how a forester changed the way he did forestry. And he
Yeah.
really changed a lot of the culture. But unfortunately, Jim passed away a couple of years ago, 3 years ago. So he never really was available to us as a leader in this struggle that we're going through right now. His
Yeah.
voice is very missed. But Jim Furnish, well, you know his name, and I'm pretty sure his book is referenced in the back of my book, so you'll be able to find it. But it is um, on on becoming a natural forest is what I think it's called.
Thank you. I just had one other question, very much related. So I've been reading that rainfall inland depends on forest cover from the coast. And when I look at all the clear cutting going on the coast, I'm like, don't you think that relates back to the wildfires? I mean, in addition to the tree plantations, it's a double whammy. It's like we've got
Yeah.
massive clear cutting, reducing. So it all goes back to, and again, I'm on this quest, like, has somebody done any research on the effects of all that lost transpiration? Because we're messing with the hydrologic cycle when we remove all those trees, and it's
Yeah,
um,
Susan, you're absolutely right. And the hydrologic work has been done from a couple of groups of scientists. One is from the H.G. Andrews Experimental Forest in that's in the Willamette National Forest, in the Oregon Cascades, and the other is from the two um, forest ecologists that I mentioned earlier from your Department of Natural Resources, Holofsky and Donato, have
okay.
written a lot about the effects of redesigning the forest from being a mix of all ages, from black burned to old growth, into a wall-to-wall tree farm
Yeah,
plantations. And it
amazing.
has devastating effects in the water cycle and in biodiversity, and it keys into so many of our problems. It keys into why we have an extinction problem, why we have this global warming. And there's an easy solution to this. We know what to do. It's just we don't have the will to do it. But it's a good thing to look into, and those two places where research is pretty rich would be a good place to start.
Thank you. Yeah, that's something I bring to the Board of Natural Resources. I'm always looking for scientists or, things I can cite for like, here you go, now
Yeah.
go forth and make good
Yeah,
decisions.
I know that Holofsky and Donato have a few different references in the back of
Oh,
Born of
great.
Fire, and you could start there.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. That's how to fight that's
Yeah.
how to fight the
Keep showing
state,
up. Yeah.
because they still sort of feel obligated to follow the best available science. And so instead of just taking their word for it, you've got a whole trove of best available science that you can counteract. And what I have done that seems to be effective is to not just cite the paper, but cite the paragraph that really condemns what they're doing. So,
Yes.
this is what Holofsky and Donato say, and then quote it. And
Yes. Yeah.
then that holds up a little better in the argument that, oh, we're doing the best we can. So.
Thank you very much. I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
If there's more questions, we can hold them till later, unless somebody's burning up. And if you guys want to see this it's an 18-minute film. It's real pretty, and so I kind of left you guys with the forest on fire and getting cut it down, and blah, 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 blah. And this is for the most part more hopeful. So what do you think?
Great. Let's pause the recording here and we'll shift into this next portion of the evening. That sounds great.
Okay,
All
I'm gonna
right.
stop my share. Come on.
Beautiful. And I'm finding the stop recording button.